Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of On the Shoulders of Giants with Rabbi Shmuel Bloom. Today we're going to be talking about the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. Rabbi Shmuel Bloom, who took part in many meetings of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah and was zocha to learn from Gedolei Olam on almost a daily basis for over 45 years. And today he's going to be taking us behind the scenes with incredible stories, insights, and how it is to be living side by side with the giants of the giants, and much, much more. So let's get right to it. I'm Yisrael Yudkowsky. You are listening to the Foundations podcast.
Emunas Chachamim and Da'as Torah. Sometimes they're interchangeable, but very often we have to really understand that they mean different things. Emunas Chachamim is almost blind that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, don't turn right or left, whatever the Chachamim say. That's what you have to follow. Afilu shemin small, Moshe Yamin. You think it's right, you think it's left. Doesn't make a difference. Hakadosh Baruch Hu gave over the Torah, a Torah shebiksav and a Torah shebal peh, and the Torah shebal peh is given over from idor ledor, even though we now have it in writing. But it's given over to the Chachamim. The Chachamim of each dor are the ones who determine what the Torah really means, what they've learned from their Rabbeim, who learned from their Rabbeim, who understand that. The importance of listening to the Chachamim and the effect of it, probably the most fascinating the thing I can say was the famous, the Michtam Eliyahu wrote a letter to somebody who asked him, how come the Gedolei Yisroel, is before the Second World War, didn't recommend that people should go to Eretz Yisrael, and because of that, he was saying, because that's how many people died. And the Michtam Eliyahu says, most of the people asked the question aren't looking for an answer, but I happen to know the person who wrote the article, the letter, and I know that you're sincere, and so I'm going to explain it to you. I'm going to explain it with the story of Purim. In the story of Purim, Achashverosh made a party for all the people of the world. He was the king of 127 Medinas. He invited everybody to a party. Unfortunately, the story was that it was the party to celebrate the fact that the Jews are not going to get back to Eretz Yisrael. That was the underlying reason. And Mordechai said to the Jews, don't go. And they said to Mordechai, you crazy? Everybody's going. The king will kill us. We're going to go and boycott the party of the king.
He rules over the whole world.
It's Nefashis. He says, and therefore we have to. And Mordechai said, no. Stam Yenom, other things. Mordechai said, no. The Jews said, I'm sorry, Mordechai. We have no choice. We have to go. Sakonas Nefashis, they went. And you know what happened? Nothing. Everything went along fine. It was fine. The party ended, and Vashti got killed. But everything was, as far as the Jews were concerned,
everything was great, yeah.
They had kosher food for them. They had hashgacha on the wine. Everything was fine. 9 years later, Haman was elevated by Achashverosh, and he said he wanted everybody to bow down to him. Bow down. It wasn't Avodah Zarah. He had, the Tosfos says it wasn't Avodah Zarah. He had something around his neck, and he wanted people to bow down to him to show that he's the boss. And Mordechai says he's not allowed to. Mordechai, please.
If you don't bow down, he's going to punish us.
He's going to punish us. He's going to kill us. It's a sakonas nefashos. Mordechai said no. So they said, okay, Mordechai, you don't want to bow down to him. And he says, go walk around the block. Don't go in front of him and stand in front of him and not listen to him on purpose to show that we're not going to bow down to him. And Mordechai says, no, I have to show that this is the right thing. So he goes and he said, he'll kill us. And he said, doesn't make a difference. We're going to go. Mordechai goes, doesn't bow down. And you know what happens? Haman wants to kill the Jews.
You see, Mordechai, we told you this is what's going to happen. You did the wrong thing. Yeah.
Right? So what did Mordechai tell them? Mordechai says, no, it's not because of me. It's because 9 years ago, I told you not to go to the Suda of Achashverosh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had Charon Av. He waited a while. But 9 years ago you did that. That's why Haman is coming to try to wipe us out. What's your reaction to that?
We could say, oh, if I would be then, of course I would be on Mordechai's side. Like when you say like that, like obviously it looks like everybody, like he's trying to get out of, the problems that he caused. That's what it looked like. That he said by the Suda that we're going to get punished, and we didn't. So, okay, whatever. We didn't get punished. Great. And then Haman comes and he says, oh, you're not going to get punished even if we don't bow down, and then we do get punished, and it's like, oh no, it's because 9 years ago I told you. So it's just so like, oh, you're playing games here? Like, it looks like even worse.
And chas v'shalom, that would have been the reaction of the Jews at the time. But the Jews said, Mordechai, we'll do tshuva. You're right. We'll accept it. We accept emunas chachamim. We accept what the chachamim said. And the Jews were saved. The Chafetz Chaim was crying out in the early 1930s. He says the Jewish community was going down. There was intermarriage. There was people going away from the yeshivas. When the Chafetz Chaim was supposed to leave Europe to come to Eretz Yisrael, he pleaded with them. He says, please to send their children to yeshivas, not to the secular schools, because who knows what's going to happen. He pleaded, and he said, Chas v'sholem, Rabbi Schwab spent the Shabbos in the house of the Chafetz Chaim, and the Chafetz Chaim was benching, and the whole benching, he benched slowly and nicely and so on. When he came to Rachem, he started crying. Rachem, no, Hashem Elokeinu, Yisrael Amecha, Vayishlayim Yirecha. And at the end of the benching, he said, I don't remember the numbers of them, there's many millions of who died in the First World War. He said, that's a kinderspiel, that's a child's play to what's going to happen, chas v'sholem, if the Yidden don't do tshuva, if the Yidden don't come back to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And now you want to blame the Chafetz Chaim? And now you want to blame the Gedolei Yisrael?
No, why didn't they tell the Jews to leave? They could have saved the whole...
They could have saved if the Jews would have listened. In the generation of Mordechai, they listened and they were saved. And Rachmana litzlan here, they didn't listen. And unfortunately, we have the results of that. So, listening... Emunas Chachamim, whether you understand it, whether is something, one of the Memches Dvarim Shater Nikas B'hem, that's something that we have to accept. But I'd like to talk today a little bit more, not just about Emunas Chachamim, whatever they say we accept, which we do have to. What I'd like to talk about is the idea of Da'as Torah. Da'as Torah means that Gedolei Yisrael, and in fact, Rav Ruderman told me that you don't have to be a Gedolei Yisrael. You can train your mind to have Da'as Torah, to think the way the Torah thinks.
Like meaning that even to have Da'as Torah, you don't necessarily need to be a Gadol?
No, if somebody is Isaac in Torah, and he learns Torah, and he's involved in Torah, and Rav Ruderman gave me examples of people who so involved in Torah that began to think Torahic. They think the way the Torah thinks and the way the Rebbeinu Shalom thinks. We make our decisions, most people make the decisions based on natural effects. What they think, if I open this business, I'm going to be successful, I'm not going to be successful. I open a podcast, people are going to listen, not going to listen. I take surveys. But some people, and Gedolei Yisrael, Gedolei Yisrael, think differently. They think, what does the Rebbeinu Shalom want? What value is this podcast? Is this what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants? Is it going to affect other people? Is it not going to affect? How is it going to affect other people? Is this what the Rebbeinu Shalom want of me? So these are the types of questions that are looking from, not from across, but from above. What does the Rebbeinu Shalom want, and what is he trying to do here? He's talking to us, but how do we listen, as we said last week? What's he trying to say? And Gedolei Yisrael, who are immersed in Torah, have a special way of understanding a little bit what the Rebbeinu Shalom. For instance, way back a number of years ago, there was a question of me, Yehudi. Question is, who is a Jew who can come into Eretz Yisrael? There's the law of return. Anybody who has one of 4 grandparents is Jewish, because that was the term that Yechiel Machshemai said, he killed a Jew if he had 1 or 4 grandparents. So they said that's
even if it was the father's father, his mom is not Jewish.
No, I'm not Jewish, but Hitler would say that's Jewish, and we're going to kill them also. So the state of Israel accepted that as the definition of what is a Jew. Hitler was the one who gave them the definition. So then there were a lot of Russians started coming. And Russians, there was a lot of intermarriage in Russia, and a lot of them came. And the question is, who was a Jew, who was allowed to come to the country? And of course, the politicians, I don't know if that's a negative term, but the shluchim, the Agudas Yisrael members of the Knesset, were fighting it. We have to understand it's a bad thing to bring Jews. Reb Kamenetsky got up at a convention of Agudas Yisrael, and he had an altogether different insight. He said, what's the schus hakiyum of Medinat Yisrael? And what gives them the strength to be able to exist in Medina?
He's saying for 2,000 years we were in Galus, and all of a sudden now
more than that. He says the Ben Gurion and so on. They weren't they
weren't religious.
They weren't religious. They weren't. He says, and yet they had a schus hakiyum. Mm-hmm. What is this? On what basis?
Why did they deserve it?
Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say that we should have it, and it should last, and it should be defended, and it should with miracles?
Yeah.
And he said that after the Second World War, the Jews were so depressed that if they would stay in Europe, they would have just mixed with the Goyim. They would have given up. They wouldn't have been Jews anymore. We see in America, when they came among the Jews, it's from the first generation, second generation held on, but without chinuch, so many of them left afterwards. Today we have such a major intermarriage problem in America.
Yeah.
So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He took them to Eretz Yisrael. And when they came to Eretz Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch surrounded them by millions of Arabs who were dedicated to throwing them into the sea. They had to marry Jews. There was nobody else. They couldn't get out. When there was a peace agreement, when Oslo was on, Rav Pam was worried because the Arab students started coming into the colleges and they sat next to the Jewish students.
And you see, Taka, today there's such a big problem with the Arabs and Jews married.
With intermarriage. But as long as there's a hatred from the Arabs to the Jews, that was able to keep Klal Yisroel pure. That was able to keep even people who weren't religious, but they stayed firm.
Yeah, it's so funny to see that even like aside from like you're saying that Reb Pam was worried when they had a peace agreement, is that normally, like you said, you look at it from the world sense, like, of course, it was the best thing in the world to have a peace agreement. You know, there's always threats and missiles and terrorist attacks, and kind of you have a peace agreement, so you bring that all down. You're saving lives. You know, it's what could be better? But you see the Da'as Torah, he comes and say, no, you know, this might be a bad thing because now you might have intermarriage. So like you see, even though you had all the terrorist attacks and wars, but that was one of the things that was holding the Jewish nation together. So like you see also, it's another point of Da'as Torah is that you know, you look at it from Torah perspective and you look at it of what just makes sense as to, you know, could be two completely different things.
That doesn't mean that you don't want the peace agreement. You want the peace agreement, but you're worried about it. And you have to be concerned about it. And sometimes maybe there is a decision not to do it. Says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky is the non-Jews, the Gentiles coming from Russia, and they're going to come to Eretz Yisrael, and they're going to be in the army, and they're going to be in universities, and they'll be sitting next to in the co-ed classrooms, the boys and the girls together. It's going to cause intermarriage. What defense will the state of Israel have? What defense will the Medina has? This is what's defending it, and they lose the defense. That's what worried him. An altogether different perspective. As you say, like Rav Pam, also with the peace agreement, is because they don't look at it from the way the New York Times looks at it, right? Or what makes the most sense, or what we think that makes the most sense. But they look at it from the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How does HaKadosh Baruch Hu what does he want, and how is he looking at it? And if you look at that, you get an altogether different perspective, and that's the perspective of Da'as Torah. And that's one of the reasons why we have to ask the Gedolei Yisrael, besides the Siyata, the Shema, and the Amunas Chachamim, and so on, but just to look at it from a different perspective, that's such a great valuable. I know when personally, I was learning in the Kollel in Yisrael, and there was a need for somebody to come into work in the office together with Rabbi Newberger. And Rav Ruderman called me in. It was back and forth with Reb David, so on, I shouldn't. But then Rav Ruderman called me in, and he taught me a Chassam Sefer. The Chassam Sefer says, "Hamachas ani me Avram asher ani Yisa." Before HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroys Sodom, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, should I cover up, should I hold back from telling Avram Avinu what I'm going to do with Sodom? That's a question. Hey, Sheila. Hamachasa, should I cover it up? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, should I give Nevuah to Avram Avinu? In Chav Dalet Sifrei Tanakh, in all the 24 Sifrei Tanakh, we don't find any time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should ask, should I give Nevuah to Yeshaya? Should I give Nevuah to Yehoshua? Should I give Nevuah to Moshe? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Nevuah when he wants to give Nevuah. When he doesn't want to give
the Madrega of having Nevuah,
you get it. And where he doesn't want to give Nevuah, he doesn't give Nevuah. If he wants to inform somebody something, he does. If he doesn't, well, so how come that HaKadosh Baruch Hu over here asks a question in the Torah? The Torah mentions the question. Should I hold back what I said? And the Chassam Sefer says a tremendous insight. He said, in order to be a Navi, like everything else in life, you have to prepare for it. You can't be a Navi automatically. Right? You have to prepare for it. There's Yeshivas B'nai HaNaviim we find in the Tanakh. Yeshivas B'nai HaNaviim. What's the curriculum in that yeshiva? What do they learn? Be'iku, they learn Hisbodedus. He says you stay by yourself and you have an opportunity to think. And you think, and ultimately you separate your Gashmias from the Ruchnias. You find in the Yeshivas B'nai HaNaviim, they were lying on the floor, and then the Shamas went up and to Shamayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to relate to them and talk to them and give them Nevuah. Avram Avinu, says the Chassam Sefer, should never have been a Navi. He didn't fulfill the curriculum. He didn't fulfill the prerequisites. He didn't prepare. Why? Because he was busy with the Yishmaelim and he was talking about Nefesh Yesher B'char, and he's running back and forth and doing all these different things and helping people in shechting and preparing things, as we saw that he did by the Malachim when they came. B'derech HaTeva, naturally, Avram Avinu should not have been a Navi. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hamachasa ani me Avram asher ani Yisa. Should I hold back the Madrega of Nevuah from Avram Avinu? Ki yedativ leman asher yitzave esbonav as beiso acharov. He's doing this in order to teach his children, in order to create children, in order to be Mekadosh Shem Shamayim, in order to let people know about the world. He's
spread the word of Torah,
the Torah Yiddishkeit, the whole world. He says all comes from Avram Avinu. All the Yiddishkeit, everything that we have comes from Avram Avinu. He's teaching us. So should I hold back a personal Madrega because he doesn't do the prerequisites? So Chassam Sefer has a fascinating statement. He says it's a haftocha. It's a promise that if somebody works for the Rebbeinu Shalom, he doesn't lose any madrega than he would otherwise have. So Rav Ruderman told me, is you think that you're going to sit and learn in Kollel, you're going to become a Talmud Chacham. I guarantee you that if you work in the office, you have to learn, obviously. I think he told me you have to learn at least 2 hours a day. You have to learn 2 hours a day. I guarantee, and the rest of the time you work for the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Rebbeinu Shalom will not make you any less of a Talmud Chacham. I don't know how much Talmud Chacham I would have stayed if I stayed in the Kollel, but I wouldn't be any less of a Talmud Chacham than if I would have stayed in the Kollel. And Lemay says, I saw it. I saw it in practice. It worked out. The circumstances, I ended up saying a Daf Yomi Shir for 35 years. To say a Daf Yomi Shir, you have to prepare a good minimum of 3 hours. Almost every Magid Shir, you ask them how long they prepare. To prepare a decent Shir, you have to. And I didn't have the 3 hours. I was working in the Aguda. I didn't have the 3 hours to do. So I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning, and then a half an hour before the Shir, I would look over the Gemara. And I would say, I'm really not saying a Shir. I'm just, I made a laning on it to look at it, and I'm saying it. But they would ask me questions, and I give Rishonim's thru and so on. It's not because I'm so smart. is because I had to have tocha from the Chassam Sefer that Rav Ruderman gave me. He says that if you work for the Rebbeinu Shalom, then you then you don't lose your madrega. Now, that's not something that a person can tell somebody from his own mind. Right? That's something that's natural. You know, if you go to college, if you take a course and so on, if you study, you're going to know it. And if you don't study, you're not going to know it, right? You know, it's not going to fly into you, from your head. But Da'as Torah is different. Da'as Torah is something which comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's a gift from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And being a gift from the Rebbeinu Shalom, if you work for the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Rebbeinu Shalom gives you the gift for free. So that's another way of looking at things differently. Is a different aspect, different outlook, because you're looking at it from what's the Rebbeinu Shalom interested in, what's he doing, and how does he do it? How have you learned in the Torah? How does HaKadosh Baruch Hu said?
How would one know the right way of, to balance the learning and the work that, he needs to do? And I'll throw in also, family time. Obviously you can't just work and learn all day. You need to be with your family. So you get married, you have kids. So what's the right way to balance between family, learning, and working?
There's no simple answer to that. That's as an aside. But you have to go to your Rebbe. A person has to have a Rebbe who knows him well, who is interested in his welfare, who doesn't have negias, because a person that always has his own negias. We spoke about that in the first time with Gillen.
Emotional, like you feel this is too hard, this is, I'll do that instead.
So you have to share it with somebody who thinks with Da'as Torah, somebody who has learned Torah, as a Rebbe who has your interest in heart, and sit down and discuss it with him. And the answer will be different in different circumstances and different people. Everybody's the different individual, and everybody has to make the decision based on the discussion with somebody who's going to guide him and follow through on that. Not everybody should be learning all the time. Not everybody should be working all the time. And I can't say one third either. There's the different circumstances.
It's not a one size fits all. It's each person,
each person has to think that way.
And could these things change from time to time? Like could have, let's say, when you're younger is, to learn half the day and work half the day, and then once you get older is work less and learn more, or, the opposite?
A person has to be flexible. A person in life has to adjust with what the opportunities are and what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives him. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us nisyanis all the time, different circumstances. And after the consultation with a Mora Derech, with somebody who you have confidence in, and he has confidence in, and he understands you, he says to direct you in a way that's best for you.
And if let's say, you have a certain thing that, and you went to your Rebbe, you spoke it through, and he said, this should, you should be doing A. And then, later on, a similar situation comes up. Should you still go again to your Rebbe, or should be, last time it was, the same situation. He told me to do this, so, he's probably going to tell me again to do this. So, should you rely on that, or again, every time you should go to your Rebbe to discuss it with him?
I think it's kedai to be in constant contact and to regular contact with the Rebbe. Circumstances change. And sometimes decisions change. We'll have an opportunity to talk about the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah decisions that changed with different circumstances. I remember a meeting of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. Actually, it wasn't the full Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. It was Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky and Reb Shneir Kotler and the Belushov Rebbe Zechet Tzadikim Levracha. We called it a meeting because we had a request from Iran asking whether they should leave Iran.
This is like the Jewish community?
The Jewish community. The Jewish community, whether they should leave Iran. And the question was that, say, of course, let them leave. If they can come out. First of all, it was dangerous to come out. A lot of them came out through the deserts and got smuggled to Vienna, to Eretz Yisrael, different places. It was it wasn't easy.
How long ago was this?
This was in the beginning of the 1980s.
Oh, not too long ago.
Not too long ago. So then the time when I was in the Aguda. And the Iranian Rescue Committee was a group of Balabatim from the Aguda who formed the committee, who paid for the smuggling, who helped them. And when they came to Vienna, set up programs for them, and then ultimately got them to yeshivas. It all started with it started again. The Reb Binyomin was prepared the refuah before the Makkah. Rabbi Naftali Neuberger, later the president of Yeshivas Nei Yisrael, the brother-in-law of Reb Ruderman, who I worked for a number of years, had a nephew, Rabbi Shachatovich, who was hired to take care of the chinuch in Iran during the time the Shah of Iran was still there, which was a good situation for the Jews. And they had a network of schools, and he invited Rabbi Neuberger to come to visit him in Iran. And he went and he visited, and he said what we should do is take a group of 10 Bachrim and bring them to Yeshivas Nei Yisrael, and they should learn, they become Rabbanim and go back to be able to teach in the community in Iran. And that was the refuah before the Makkah, because when the Shah of Iran was overthrown and Khomeini, Ayatollah Khamenei took over and made it dangerous for the Jews, and the Jews couldn't have so much freedom of religion and teaching over there in Iran, there was some place for them to come. So there was something to come, and they had some leadership, some guides in Yeshivas Nei Yisrael. But the question was, should we recommend teenagers to come out of Iran?
No, obviously, why not? Of course.
Why not? Because in Iran, there was no such thing as intermarriage. If there was intermarriage in the community, the yichus was pure. If there was one or two intermarriages in the whole country in a year, that family got ostracized. Nobody would talk to them. They wouldn't have any dealing with them. And the yichus was pure. Every Jewish boy married a Jewish girl. There was no such thing as marrying an Iranian non-Jew. When they came out, and many of them came to the colleges, they went to Iowa, and they met Goyim. And there was no community control. So it started being intermarriage. First time in the history of Iran. Iran goes back to the time of they went to the kever of Mordechai and Esther.
Wow.
As they didn't come back in the Bayis. Many people didn't come back by Bayis Sheni. They're still there from Bayis Rishon.
Wow.
And the community remained pure. Almost no intermarriage. And here they come to America, and they fill into the America quagmire, and you have starting having intermarriage in America. So do you recommend them to come to America? Stay in Iran, where at that time it wasn't sakonis nefashis, it wasn't comfortable, and when they had battles with Iraq, they would put the Jewish boys out in the front, and then it was a little bit of sakonis nefashis. On the other hand, they're staying as a Jewish community, and there was an active Jewish community there, and a Torah community. And come to America, maybe go to the colleges, maybe intermarriage. What do you do? So they asked the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah to give guidance. And as I say, we couldn't get everybody together, but we had the Blushev Rebbe and Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky and Reb Shneur Kotler, and the two sides were presented to them. And in the middle of the meeting, your great uncle, the Blushev Rebbe, started shaking. He said, I can't stay here. I can't stay at this meeting. In front of my eyes is the fact that in Europe, before the Second World War, I had an einzige Tochter, I had one single daughter. And she had got married, and I had an einzige Einikel, she had a baby girl. And in the late 1930s, early 1940s, they tried to decide whether to leave Europe or stay. And they decided to stay. And I lost my one and only daughter and my one and only granddaughter. How can I tell a mother to keep the child in danger? I know that the situation is different. The Muslims are not the Germans. Right? Well, some say they're worse, but they don't go killing. They aren't going out killing Jews. It's dangerous. But it's not the same. How can I tell a mother I can't stay here?
It's going to come. The decision is going to come from an emotional part. So
come from an emotional part. He says, I can't say, and he got up and left the meeting. He left the meeting. The decision ultimately was Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky's. The Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky said, those boys or girls who we know are coming to America and are going to go to yeshivas, to Nei Yisrael, to Long Beach, to Skokie, we organized the many yeshivas. They took Iranian boys. And what to the Beis Yaakovs? The girls coming to the Beis Yaakov, we should encourage them to come out. But those who are going to go to the Jewish community, the general community, we should not encourage them, we shouldn't discourage them. We shouldn't give them an answer. Let them decide themselves whatever they'll do. Whatever they do, they should do the right thing.
So like whoever decides to come, we'll give them all, all the help they need, but like we won't push them to do it.
We won't encourage them to come. Mm-hmm. That was the decision. Now I don't remember exactly, about 10 years later, there was a meeting actually in Camp Aguda of the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, where at that time there was the Iranian 12. They put in jail the people, the one who gave out the Pirkei prizes in Iran, the one who worked with the children and so on, were taken in jail. We say because they were training anti-Iranian people, because they were teaching, they were having Pirkei contests. They were giving money. They were giving money to train spies. Is the way they were trying, and it was a little bit of a danger. And the question came up again: should we encourage those who can come out to come out? And there, 10 years later, there was an altogether different situation, because the Talmidim of Nei Yisrael and others who had come out, who had learned, now started communities in Los Angeles and Atlanta and in communities throughout the country, in Chicago, in Baltimore. And so there was a frum community of Iranians who could be mekabel. So that same decision that we don't encourage people to come out 10 years before when there was nothing for them here, is 10 years later, circumstances changed. And the circumstances changed, the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah changed. The decision was a different decision. So you always have to know, what the situation is, and as situations change, you have to go back and ask again. And sometimes the answer is different.
So let's go back to the beginning of Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah, how it all started, when it all started, and how exactly it works.
Klal Yisroel, when we think of European Jewry with glamour, we think of the Chafetz Chaim, we think of the Ger Rebbe, the masses of Chassidim. So, but the truth is that in the early 1900s, Klal Yisroel was in danger. There was a very, very serious problems, and mainly we were losing our youth. The Haskalah and reform had taken a number of our children in certain countries, in Germany, other countries in the 1880s, and the 1900s, political Zionism started taking over cities. My Rebbe David Kongas told me Kabrin, when he was growing up, nobody would open Mechal Shabbos for Hesia. It's
unheard of.
It's unheard of, right? So maybe somebody smoked in his house when nobody saw. And he says that there were chashis on, but otherwise the whole city was frum. Came along the political Zionists, and they came with youth groups. And they started coming to the group, and they said, we're suffering discrimination, everything that we have, it's all because of because we're not recognized, we don't have our own state, we don't have our own language. If we want to take care of, there shouldn't be anti-Semitism. So in the way we have to come, we have to have our own state. And then really all you have to keep is the language, we have to learn Ivrit, and we have to have a state like any other nation, and I think is a bit. And the youth appreciated that. And a lot of them started going. So they started changing. They started Chilul Shabbos. And more of the children, I mentioned before, the Chafetz Chaim, when he was going to leave Europe, he says, you have to save the yeshivas. The Miri Yeshiva Bachrim didn't get married till they were almost 40 years old because no girls wanted to marry them. There was no Beis Yaakov. There was nobody training. They wanted to marry a yeshiva bach. They made plays making fun of the yeshiva bach, making fun of the rabbanim. So that was.
I'd rather marry a lawyer, a doctor.
Right. What do you call that? That's some. Right. So go to marry yeshiva bach was looked down upon. Sarah Schneer changed that, Baruch Hashem, with the Beis Yaakov movement, but before then they didn't have that. So they had an idea, Marina Yaakov Rosenheim and others in the German community. They said, each country is suffering, losing their battles, but each country has a maila that maybe the other ones don't have. The Germans are great organizers. They were able to build structure and organize, and they know how to build an organization. Lita had Klal Yisroel, Chaim Ozer, Chafetz Chaim, is the great Torah leadership of Lita. Poland had the masses and had the spirit of the Chassidish Rebbes. Hungary had the rabbinic leadership. They had fought the Reform, the Chassam Sofer, the Talmidim of Chassam Sofer. Each one of us is losing our battles. But maybe if we sat down together in one room and we took the German organizers and the Torah leadership of Lita and the Ruach of the Chassidim and the experience of the Hungarian Rabbanim and put them in one room and said, maybe we can figure out some solutions. Maybe we can change the tide.
If we take the strong, parts of each one of the communities and bring it all together, maybe we could figure out.
Correct.
Smart.
Right? Okay. So they decided to come together and form what later became Agudas Yisrael. Agudas Yisrael was to take all these different groups and sit down. And the first Knesset Gedolei, they supported the Beis Yaakov, the movement came in, and the Daf Yomi, and a Jewish press, and support for Eretz Yisrael, for a frum community in Eretz Yisrael. Because all these things came, everybody had different ideas, but they didn't know how to activate it. They activated the organizers. So you put it all together, and they created a new organization, Agudas Yisrael, to bring all the Jews together and to change the tide. Mm-hmm. And to a large extent, they were effective in helping to change the tide.
And that was the famous video of the Chafetz Chaim. It was from the first Knesset.
Chafetz Chaim in 1923 was the Chafetz Chaim coming to the Knesset Gedolei, and the story with Reb Meir Shapiro. Again, you see we think the Chafetz Chaim like a fine grandfather, a nice edel, fine person, which he was, but also just the Reb Meir Shapiro, who was a young Rav, Chassidish, young Rav, had an idea. He said, as a speech at the Knesset Gedolei, he said, we're coming together, we want to work together. We don't speak the same language. We don't have the same background. We come from different communities. We don't wear the same clothing. Everyone has different hats. So how do you expect to work together? So he said, I have an idea. He opened up a Gemara, and he said, let's look at the Gemara. The Mishnah was written in Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara was written in Bavel. Rashi was written in France. Tosfos was written in Germany. And they all sit together on one page. And they all work together. If we expect all of us to come together and work together, there's only one way. If we learn Torah together. If everybody would say the same daf, learn the same daf. When one Jew comes from one community to another, he goes on the train, he's sitting next to somebody, and they can talk and learning. And a Jew comes on a boat, and he comes to America. After 2 weeks on the boat, he's been learning his daf, and he walks to the east side to a little shul, and there's somebody they're learning the same thing. The
same daf that he was learning.
Same daf as he was learning. That will bring Jews together. That's the way we'll have an Agudas Yisrael.
That's how he started the Daf Yomi.
And he wanted to start the Daf Yomi, but not everybody agreed. Not everybody thought there were all reasons why it shouldn't. People to learn that it's not best for learning. Other things.
So probably now after the fact, you're like, what? How could you disagree with such a thing? Like you see the MetLife Stadium, everything that's going on. But before it was a thing, probably so much other things.
Even now, people complain.
Yeah,
but for the most part, you had that. Mm-hmm. So now they came and the Chafetz Chaim. So Reb Meir Shapiro, before he made a speech, he mentioned it to a number of people what he was thinking, and some were for it and some were against it. Jews like the tumult, all different things. The Chafetz Chaim heard, and the Chafetz Chaim liked the idea. So the Chafetz Chaim told Reb Meir Shapiro, "We have a meeting of the Rabbonim. Let's say it was at 10 o'clock. Don't come at 10 o'clock. Come late. Come at 10:30." Okay. Chafetz Chaim told him to come at 10:30. He'll come at 10:30. The Chafetz Chaim comes to the meeting. Chafetz Chaim sits down. The Chafetz Chaim leaves a chair empty next to him. And the meeting started, discussing different issues. At 10:30, the door opens, and Reb Meir Shapiro comes in. The Chafetz Chaim, he says, "Oh, Shapiro," he's plump, "please sit next to me." He sat next to the Chafetz Chaim, and the Chafetz Chaim said, "I understand you had an idea. I would like you to suggest the idea to all the Rabbanim." And once the Chafetz Chaim did that, nobody could say a word. Right? So that way, I say
he gave it that spotlight that nobody could.
Spotlight, and the Chafetz Chaim supported. So even those people who were against it, they couldn't open their mouths. So I say the Tamavata, Chafetz Chaim, everybody. So he says he knew how to handle a situation, and he knew how to develop, and he did. So at any rate, they started this organization. An organization for Klal Yisroel was not a simple thing. Klal Yisroel had some bad experiences, Shapsi Tzvi, where one person was the leader of so much of Klal Yisroel, and when he went sour, when he went bad, there was a crisis in Klal Yisroel. So Klal Yisroel always had, during the Golus, every rov of every city is in charge of his own community, and they didn't have big, broad organizations for all of Klal Yisroel, all the world, because if that became sour, something went wrong there, it's a
There's no one to turn to. If you have each community, even if one goes bad, you still have the rest of them.
Exactly. So there were many people worried about making this new giant organization, a world organization, a world organization to represent everybody with one leadership, with one community. And also, they were worried, when you have an organization, who makes the decisions for the organization? An organization has negias. They want to have members, they have to raise money, the things that have to be done, they want publicity. So they decided they're going to set up a control. There's going to be a control to the organization, that the people who are running the organization, what they call the secretaries, right, and the executives in our term, the executive would not be the ones to make the decisions. That the decisions should be put into hands of, and they debated the term, what to call it, but the Chafetz Chaim was felt strongly also that it should be called the Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah. There should be a committee of Gedolei Hatorah representing the different communities that make up the body of Klal Yisroel and the body of Agudas Yisrael. And that Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah should be the ones to make the ultimate decision and policy making for the organization. And that was the first creation of something of that sort. It is to run, because the danger of having an organization run off by itself, and the danger of having a world organization, in order to set up the control, they set up Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah.
Oh, and how was it to be, you see, like the Gdela, Moshe Feinstein, probably Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, and of that, all the Gedolei Yisrael, to see, the whole back and forth of, kind of behind the scenes of how, we just read on the, Sunday morning newspaper what the decision was, but to really to experience the whole back and forth and how everything happened, how was it to be a part of it?
I don't know, how should I put it, is the thing that got me the most satisfaction, and the thing that I enjoyed the most and felt I learned the most from, was the fact as in our Agudas Yisrael, is the ability, the experience to sit in at meetings of Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah and to hear how issues are threshed out and how it comes to a consensus, which is Da'as Torah, has been probably one of the most gratifying and things in my life. That I was zeicha to be able to see Gedolei Yisrael from the first Moetzes Gedolei Hatorah meetings that I attended that had Reb Feinstein and Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky to the later ones, the Novominsker Rebbe and the Gedolei Yisrael afterwards throughout those generations for a period of 45 years, to be zeicha, to be able to see the growth and to see how decisions are made and to see how Da'as Torah is formed and thought. And it was something, a very, very valuable lesson that I have to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the schus to be able to have been a part of.
That is it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something new. Hope you were able to put something in your pocket for life. I am so thankful for you watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend, let them know so they can enjoy it as well. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up, 5-star review, subscribe really wherever you're listening, Spotify, iTunes, or any other podcast platform. Also, make sure to go check out our website, JFoundations.com. We have more podcasts, videos, divrei Torah, and so much more. If you have any questions, send an email to info@JFoundations.com or WhatsApp +972 55 711 6220. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will be back next week.